Video 4 is only going to have one parent function, which is going to be the reciprocal or rational function. So the parent is just 1 divided by x, right? And if we have 1 divided by x, I can simply make a t-chart to draw that parent function, which I'm going to do. So I have an x and a y, and for this one, I'm going to do -2, -1. Now I can't plug in 0, so I don't want to put that on my table because 1 divided by 0 is undefined. But I am going to use -1/2. And then I'm going to use the same things but positive. So 1/2, 1, and 2. And the y values that I get when I plug in these x's, right? So 1 divided by -2 give me -1/2. 1 divided by -1 would give me -1. 1 divided by -1/2 gives me -2. And then with positives, I get +2, +1, and +1/2. So I can plot those points and create a graph. And it's going to look a little bit like this. So -2, -1, -1/2, 1/2, and 1, oops, and 2. And I can plot these together. It looks like this. Magic, right? All right, so what we have here is 1 over x. That's the parent function, right? Be careful when you draw these. Make sure you don't cross over the asymptotes, which are y equals 0 and x equals 0 for the vertical. So if we have this one right here, what we want to do is look at the domain. Well, we'll do that after, but we want to look at 1 divided by x plus 2. Now, this plus 2, it doesn't have parentheses around it. It doesn't have absolute value bars. It's not underneath the radical. However, it still is within the denominator. And denominators kind of have their own set of parentheses. You just don't see them. So this plus 2, we're thinking about how does this translate the graph of 1 over x? Well, the plus 2 is going to shift it left 2. So our graph, we are going to take it and literally just move it left 2 units. And how I eyeballed this is basically I need to make sure that the vertical asymptote is now at x equals -2 instead of it was before at x equals 0. So I still don't cross over a vertical line, but now it's x equals -2 because it shifted left 2, right? And then for this one over here, this 1 over x minus 5, if we set this back to the original spot, right? 1 over x minus 5, this minus 5, same thing, pretend it's in parentheses, that's going to shift it right 5. So I'm going to do the right 5 first, so that my new vertical asymptote is now x equals 5 instead of x equals 0. And that's kind of what we see here. And then the plus 3, it's not part of a denominator, right? So this is totally on the outside, which is going to result in a vertical change. And the plus 3 is going to shift this graph up 3. 1, 2, 3. And how I'm going to eyeball this when I move it is basically make sure that my horizontal asymptote is now at y equals 3, which it before was at y equals 0. So that's kind of how you can graph these pretty easily. You don't have to plot all the points again if you don't want to. You just got to pay attention to the vertical asymptotes, which are now at x equals 5 and y equals 3, which are also in the equation. So your job is to basically find the domain, range, and zeros of this final graph here, which is 1 over x minus 5 plus 3.